Thanks very much. I work with Martin at the large government department that deals with tax. I don't actually say the name because I'm not here in any official capacity. It doesn't even say it there, it just says government. I am a content designer, so I kind of mostly care about content and how the best way to meet user needs are using content, because Martin alluded to it a couple of times, but no matter how much you can do fancy stuff, like animated form labels and stuff, no one's coming to your service for that. They are generally coming to do something or find out something. So I'm going to get a bit codey at the start because I like to subvert the idea that I'm now just going to talk about verbs, which is what most people seem to think content designers do. That I sit at my desk with my hard copy Roger's Thesaurus and I just bash out simple ways of saying complicated words. So there's a couple of different types of error validation. You can break it into two sections. Validation you do in the browser, which for tech people, it's what you would call client-side validation, and things that you do on the server. So for browser validation, it boils down to using HTML5 attributes and JavaScript. HTML5 it uses attributes on form elements, a bit like Martin showed, to check what's being entered when a form's being submitted. And then when you've submitted the form and you get the error, and you like go back to kind of change it, the errors can update in like real time to give you immediate feedback. So if you needed to start a text field with a letter, but you started with a number, the minute you replace the number with a letter, the error message disappears. Which is, good. I've just said that, but I'm going to kind of slam HTML5 in a minute. So this is a question on a form which says, what is your favorite day of the week? And everything about it is kind of standard HTML. Like Martin said, you have these kind of inputs with the ID, and this one's mun, and then the label is mun, so it's tied together. If you don't do that, well, just for a laugh, write a page that doesn't do that, and then fire a screen reader through it. You will have no idea where you are on the page, and when you click into the radio button or the text field, your screen reader will not know anything about where you are. It'll just essentially say, you are in a text box. The bold text, what says required, is the HTML5, which essentially means you have to pick one of these radio buttons. If you do use HTML5 required, if you use a screen reader, when you tab onto an area, it tells you the entry is invalid before you do anything. So if I tabbed into this field set, it would essentially say, what is your favorite day of the week invalid before I've done anything, which is nice. I like being told I'm wrong before I have a chance to do something. So without any fancy styling, that's what this looks like. There's a class in CSS where you can say, if something's invalid, you can like put red lines around it and stuff. So this is what this looks like when the page loads, because I haven't answered the question yet. So it's like validation before you try and use the form, which to me, that's like, gives a chance, man. You know what I mean? So like, I'm originally from Sunderland, so when I come here, I roll out the colloquialisms like you wouldn't believe, because no one understands me in Newcastle. So yeah. Now for me, giving people this kind of information before they've had a chance to do anything is a bit weird. Like it's like telling somebody off before they've done something wrong, and it's not very accessible for a start. And what will happen is when you try and submit the form, you'll get this error. You cannot change this content. It's hard baked into HTML5. That's a lie. You can change it, but you can't change it with HTML5. And it might fade away, so it's not permanently there for you to know what you've done wrong. The assumption is you'll see it, and when it fades, you'll remember it, which isn't always the case. This is a field asking for someone's first name. I've left required in, and now I put this thing in that says pattern equals square brackets capital A to hyphen capital Z, square brackets, whatever. What it boils down to is you will type some content into this thing. The first thing will be a capital A to Z letter, and then more letters will follow it. So it looks like this. The red line would be around it even before I typed in the A. But because it's lowercase, it says please match the format requested. Now, question, how do you know what the format requested is? It doesn't tell you what the format is. Could you legitimately type in your name in a hurry with a lowercase first letter? I do, but that might just be because I'm so hip. Kids do it all the time in text and Snapchats and stuff, so I was just being cool. So required does what I showed you. Pattern does the same thing. The number of patterns is outrageous, by the way. There's loads of them. You can do min lengths and max lengths. So the error on min length and max length is great. If you type in 4 characters, you get the error, please lengthen this text to 6 characters or more. You are currently using 4 characters. But you can't change that content without doing a lot of effort. And you can't go more than 12. Something I say at work all the time is never ever put a max length on something, because you are assuming people are going to realize the text box has stopped taking their letters, because everyone touch types and doesn't look at the keys and doesn't copy things from somewhere else and paste them in and realize it's being cut. You're better off letting someone go over your limit and giving them an error message than stopping them from typing in what they think they need to type in. Min 1 and max 3. If you type something in that's above the number 3, it says value must be between less than or equal to 3, which doesn't even make sense. And if you type it in 0, it says value must be greater than or equal to 1. So the errors are pretty chunky, really. And there's no standard way to change the look and feel of them. If you have different language support, sometimes your page might be in French, but all of your errors will be in English, which is a really unusual experience to give somebody. If I was French, there is no guarantee I will understand English, or other languages are available. But yeah, you get the drift. You can customize them, but you've got to use JavaScript. There's a thing that I found out about called the Constraint Validation API, which is quite easy to mix and do things with, but essentially it boils down to you still always get the little tooltip style error appearing underneath whatever it is. But JavaScript itself, to go into the other browser type of thing, lets you fully customize error messages, styles, where they're appearing on the page and everything. So JavaScript's pretty flexible. But it has the problem that it doesn't always work. So some people work in offices where JavaScript's switched off and they can't switch it on. Some people have really poor computers or bad internet connections and JavaScript misfires, so you can't rely upon the JavaScript. But the JavaScript, these are the kind of rough things you can do with it. You can show an error or read out an error the minute someone tabs into or selects a field, that when they start typing, when they stop typing, and that doesn't mean finishes typing, that means they pause. You can give them an error. Once a limit is reached, so if there is a 25 character limit, but you haven't put a max length, you can tell them when they've hit 25 that they've gone too far. Once a pattern is not followed, like the capital A thing, when they leave a field, when they try to submit the form or after the form is submitted, these are all kind of things when you can show error messages. JavaScript can do everything except the last one, which is after the form is submitted. But the first few, 1, 2, 3, 4, everything above leaves a field can be really disruptive to certain people because they're in like a zone. They're like filling in the form. They're not fixing errors, they're filling something in. So it's very hard for some people to switch between types of kind of input styles. There's been loads of different research, and Luke Wroblewski did some, because like Martin mentioned, he's touched everything in this world. And what they did was they found that if you did it when they leave a field, and they used the JavaScript phrase, it's on blur. I don't know why, it just is. It really sped up conversions and people filled the form in faster and they tried to submit fewer errors. But the other ones actually slowed people down, especially the typing ones, because people would be typing in a password and they would be getting a red message and they would press the key and they would look. The message didn't disappear, so they'd press another one and they would do this until the message disappeared. So it can be really disruptive and it can really mess with people who use assistive technologies because they may not even know about any of this. So they'll just be clicking the button at the end of the screen, and they won't be getting any of this instant validation. There was a great article on BMR.com, which is a great website, filled with lots of good research articles. And they called this premature validation, which I quite liked because it was something funny at work. So yeah. So if you're going to use the JavaScript, their overall recommendation is when they leave a field, but then if they go back to the field and update what they've entered, you would update the error message in real time, and that's what had the best results. But this will still distract some people and cause them to be a little bit stressed because they are focusing upon the thing they've moved to. As Martin described, we in government tend to use like one thing on a page, so we minimize how much stuff's on one screen. So you generally won't find a form, like a single screen in a service, that would like say go from here to the wall, because that's just too much information. It just overwhelms people. And like the quote about not using auto tabbing because it negatively affects like some people. If your form is simpler, you tend not to need to do this kind of in-browser validation because there might only be 2 or 3 things on the page. But if you do them, this is when you do them. The other ones just freak out people. We don't really use browser validation in government. There's a few services that do. And every time I get to one, I'm always surprised that it happens, especially when I haven't even typed anything in yet and it tells us I've done it wrong. Then I just write a snarky email to the person who designed it and tell them about it. I don't really. The server kind of validation is when someone gets to the bottom of the screen and they click the button to like move on. But the server does all the validation. You have to do server validation because browser validation is not 100% effective. If I wanted to, just for a laugh, and I do this, I have to admit, I go on to web pages and I inspect element and I delete the HTML5 and then click the button to see what happens. And sometimes it lets us through. So if there's a maximum limit of 100 characters, I'm assuming that's for a reason. Like maybe there's a database somewhere which says we can't have more than 100 characters in this field. So I'll go in and delete that, type in 120 characters or possibly sometimes 10,000 characters just for a laugh. And it lets me through. Now, I don't know what happens to my thing when I get to the end. When I get to the database, it's got to be rejected. I don't do this for serious things like my bank. I do this just for laughs. Everyone has to have a hobby. But yeah, like JavaScript might not work. So server validation is essential. You have to do it, essentially. There is this notion about telling people they've done something correct. So like giving them ticks for like when they've typed in their name or their address. And this is like the article on BMR.com, which is really good. The issue I have with this from an accessibility point of view is I might have spelled my name wrong or typed in my address wrong. That tick doesn't mean the entry in this box is correct. It means the entry in this box has met our basic validation requirements. I would personally, even me as a like what you would consider to be like a digitally aware user, I would consider that to be success, not well done, mate, you've hit validation. So what the recommendation from this study and from what Luke Grabowski did was do it for when like things are like things you don't want to have to do repeat calls for. So this is the github.com sign up page for a new account. This is the Sunderlandism. So I tried the username r8cannylad and it passed, and me at r8cannylad.co.uk passed, and my password was more than 15 characters and more than 8 and included a number because these turned green. But when I did A, then A at A, then this really freaks me out, this bit. I didn't type in a number, although you think I would because including a number is green. I typed in the letter A, which is odd, but I can understand why you would do that in this scenario. Like I wouldn't want to have to keep clicking sign up for GitHub to find out that r8cannylad had been taken and then end up with GitHub like the way Google does saying, do you want to be r8cannylad274? No, I don't. I want to be something unique kind of thing. And some people use icons like this with errors, which are fine. But what you normally find is they hide them from screen readers. Rather than a screen reader going, email is invalid or already taken, I like the fact they don't know which one it is either. That's cool. Like, I'd like a bit of certainty in my error messages. But they normally hide the icons, so you don't have to have that thing where a screen reader goes, image of a red triangle with a white exclamation mark in it. So this is like a progressive enhancement purely for sighted users, normally. The thing that's really freaking you about this is, even when you do this and then click the sign up for GitHub button, it takes you to a completely different page in githubs.com with everything you've typed in transferred across, except your password, which gets deleted. But there's this green tick on the bottom. And I don't know why it's there for, because it's like a buffered thing that loads up after it's loaded. And I'm like, we're there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Why in red? What's the green for? But my personal fave, this is my shout out to Martin. It looks like there isn't a field label here or here, but there are. They're just underneath the error messages. That's pretty cool. So a screen reader would know they were there because it would probably still read them out, but a sighted user can't. So it's important to realize that sighted users, screen reader users, screen magnifier users, accessibility is about everybody. It's not about one set of people. So where to put errors? Some people just don't put errors anywhere. They just use colors. So on the left-hand side, there is an invalid email, which probably isn't invalid. If you really want to get into the validity of an email address, I suggest you go and read the specification. You can put anything in an email address. I could have a Stephen, open quotes, 19 spaces, close quotes, at A, and that is valid, assuming there is a domain called A. But so this is a fail, and this is a fail, because it doesn't match that. And apparently that might be invalid. But to a colorblind person, this is what they would see, perhaps, if they have a certain type of red-green color blindness. Now, I think you can tell the difference between that, and that when you're on your computer. Probably doesn't look so great from the back of the room. But there's nothing there to really kind of tell you what the error is. But I will point out a small thing. They've used title case on the labels, and they put colons at the end. That's mental. Capital letters are harder to read for every single person in the world who grew up reading Topsy and Tim and Janet and John books, because we are more familiar with lowercase letters. And there's no need to put a colon at the end. That's kind of like an overhang of when these would have been there. I saw a hand. So does this box and this box look roughly the same? Yeah. We did this at work with a colleague, a similar thing, where we showed him something. And someone had misapplied colors in this certain thing. So there was 3 shades of red on the screen, and he insisted one of them was black. And he said, I know that's red because I know what red looks like to me, that it doesn't look red, but I know it's red, but that one's not red. And it worked out is, if the red is close to a lighter color, it seems red to him. But if the red's close to a darker color, it appears black. And I thought, this is awesome. Let's stop using colors, everybody. No one agreed. So you could not have errors. Going back to Twitter, I'd like to point out that me and Martin did not collaborate on Slam and Twitter. So when I was just, casually surfing the Sunderland Digital Twitter account, as I do, I decided, I'm going to sign in. So I clicked the login thing at the top. And I'm not going to rehash what Martin said about the placeholders and stuff, but this is different to the main login page because these are actually above the button. But I clicked login without typing anything in because that's the crazy kind of guy I am. It actually takes you to a completely different page with this kind of like dialog box on the top. Now, taking someone to a completely different page is a bit of a weird thing to do anyway, because they'll be like, whoa, what just happened? Especially if they're in the middle of a 50-screen service. But that box that says the username and password that you entered did not match our records, please double check and try again. You cannot get to it if you were a keyboard user. You cannot get to it if you're a screen reader user. So you actually don't know what's happened. There is literally nothing on this screen that tells you you've made an error, because you cannot get to that content. So that's, you know, canny bad. See, I dropped in another canny. This is a dialog box that appeared in our travel system at work that somebody from DWP sent me. I particularly like the content in it. Sorry, a possible error has occurred during the booking process. Do not repeat the same booking as it may already be booked successfully. Cool. And then skipping this. The error, which I think is that, but they've left everything inside of the quotes, you see, because there's the closing quote. So that's a really long error, man. And I like the 10035 space colon space 10035 space colon space bracket system error. That was written by a developer. I am putting my month's wages on it. But yeah, this is in a completely separate box, which is actually accessible. LinkedIn's cool. Don't look at the code of LinkedIn. You'll cry. It's awful. So I've, again, left everything blank, and I get a summary at the top that only talks about the first error on the page. It's quite unusual that people would do this, but there are sites which summarize your errors at the top, and they put nothing at the field level. So that means if you've got a screen magnifier where you can't possibly have this and that in at the same time, you will never actually know what they're talking about. So there's no like connection between the errors, which is really odd. And then you've got where you do put them next to the field. I found sites would do all of this to put them above the label, below the label but above any hint text, below the label, below the hint but above the input, below the input, next to the input, which on a mobile is underneath, because you're never going to get it all on a mobile screen. And then there's a tooltip, which is a bit like a HTML5 thing, which looks like a box that floats and obscures content, which is not good, because you should never obscure content, because that's why people came to your service, and it keeps me in a job and pays my bills. Yay. So how to make it accessible as an overarching pattern. I will preface this with, this is the gov.uk pattern, which has been based upon research with lots and lots of users of all types of digital skills. And it is predominantly built to be accessible. Someone may ask a question later about the repetitiveness of it, but I'm going to try and cut you off at the pass with that. So you could add error colon to the page title. So when the page refreshes, some screen reader users would go back to the top of the screen and read out the page title again. If it starts off with the word error, you know for a fact something's gone wrong, which is good. I read page titles. That sounds like a really strange kind of admission in like a Alcoholics Anonymous type of thing. I read URLs. So when I say URLs that are the kind of the YouTube URL Martin is so definitely wanting to get away from, it really freaks me out, because I want them to be human readable, because they kind of give me an indication of where I am. When it says like capital V, C6, and then it just goes on, it kind of worries me a little bit. Have a summary at the top of the page. So on this field, this screen, I've got two errors. Each of these is a link which goes down to the field in question. So if the error is on something that has a label, like a form field or a select box, not that we should be using select boxes, high five Martin. I'll tell you something about select boxes afterwards when I'm not being videoed, if you like. There's a great website I can link you to, but I don't want to swear on camera. You can just link to the field's ID, and what will happen is you'll click that here, and it'll pop down to the field in question, and it takes to someone to where the error is, if the form is really long, but it also puts them in the right place. For things with a field set, like radio groups and checkboxes, you can just link to the first thing inside of the group. And this beautiful yellow boundary is the focus outline that we use on gov.uk. So this helps screen magnifier users, and all users really, know where you are on the page. When I was at university in Sunderland in 1999, I seemingly recurrently got put on a computer that the mouse didn't work. So I just learned how to use the keyboard. Now, if you start tabbing through screens in most services, you will have no idea where you are, because they don't do this. Focus outlines are brilliant. So like if I highlighted the link, they would have a yellow background. When I click this, I'll go down to the field and it'll highlight the field I'm on. So it's really useful for screen reader users, for screen magnifier users, but also just everyone. At the field level, I would always put the error message above the input but below everything else, because that's how humans read. If you put it underneath the box, it kind of makes more sense when you're doing it instantly when someone moves away from the screen. But nobody would read like this. No one goes up, down, then up, or like the way Martin described with the zigzag. No one really reads like that. Everyone tends to read top to bottom. In fact, most places that I've seen that put this underneath here, they do a trick for screen readers where it might be underneath the input, but a screen reader user will hear it as being above the input because they've used an ARIA describe by, which is, and the first rule of ARIA is you don't use ARIA if you don't need to, and you don't really need to here. You can still use the describe bys and stuff because that's how government services do it. So this is the label. After the label, this is in a span, and then this is in a span, and then this is described by both of these. So it programmatically works really well, but it also has the benefit of looking how a human reads. How humans read is great. That's not even English. This is the repetitiveness problem. Use the same error message in the summary at the top of the screen and next to the field. Some people kind of say, well, is that not a bit repetitive? You're saying the same thing twice. Yes, but it's better than saying the same thing in two different ways, because then some people have to go, does that mean the same thing as it meant up there? And it actually builds on the cognitive effort. So it looks the same, sounds the same, it means the same. All the links make sense out of context because they're like quite specific, which I'm going to get into in a minute. And it vastly reduces the time taken. I remember one guy in a usability session where I'd hacked our prototype to purposefully give them an error that they didn't have. He went, oh, that says the same as that. And I was like, oh, does that affect how you use the screen? And he went, nah, man, it's brilliant. Can I make a mistake now, can I? And I was like, video that guy, get him on a t-shirt. Then we accidentally upgraded to Windows 10 and broke that computer. So yeah. Show errors when the user tries to submit the form. You can do that using the browser validation, or you can do it using server, but you've got to at least use one of those. And if you want to use one, it's the server. If you want to use both, that's cool. The user won't notice the difference, except that it'll take less time if you're doing the JavaScript one, but you'll always have the server fallback for when JavaScript's not working properly. If you want to do the instant validation, like I said earlier, do it when someone leaves a field and then update the error message in real time, because that's what people kind of expect. But remember, this can still distract people who are in this whole, I'm filling in this form kind of mode. And because Martin and I work in government, we're not filling in cool forms like, what time do you want that train to London for your friend's hen party? It's things like, how much money did you earn last year, so we can find out how much money we're going to give you this year and possibly ruin your life or possibly enrich your life. So people are generally very stressed when they come to use government services and very kind of like anxious and hyper prepared, and most people don't want to make a mistake, and we should do our best so they don't. Now, briefly, the content of an error message, I'm going to summarize what normally takes me an hour into 3 minutes, give or take. So an error message should explain what went wrong and how to fix it. That seems pretty obvious, but most error messages don't. So the principles we came up with were be clear and concise. So describe what's happened, tell someone how to fix it, use plain English, be positive. So instead of saying you did this wrong, moron, do it right, cheers, you just say, oh, this is what you should have done, but it's kind of a better way to phrase it. And get to the point. It's amazing how many people don't. So avoid technical things like I love like a unspecified error and a error 0x903 as much as the next guy, but it doesn't really help people. Avoid blamey words like forbidden, because like they probably didn't realize that. I would avoid please and sorry, not because I'm impolite, but because they imply a choice. And you generally won't have a relationship with the people who are using your services. So are you really that kind of ingratiating with them? Probably not. I would always never use the word valid. are invalid because they mean different things to people. And it might just be my age, but I say the word invalid and I hear the word invalid in my head, but I'm very pre-internet generation when I think of these things. And avoid humor. You might be funny, but you're probably not. And if someone's filling in an application form to get a benefit, they're probably not looking for laughs. So this is possibly one of my favorite errors. That's totally real. Your password must be at least 18,770 characters and cannot repeat any of your previous 30,689 passwords. Please type a different password. Type a password that meets these requirements in both text boxes. Microsoft Server Edition 2000, but totally real. Seems a bit long for a password to me, but yeah. I mean, the error is quite concise, but come on. Come on. This is one that crops up a lot, and I don't really use the Twitter anymore as much as I used to, but every now and again, there'll be a Twitter storm about this type of error message. So what do you think's wrong with this guy's name? That makes it invalid. Cool. Who has spaces in their names? Yeah, no one, right? Who has hyphens in their names? Nobody. Who has apostrophes? Nobody. Who has capital letters at moments you possibly wouldn't expect? Loads of people. And just imagine it from a user's perspective. Imagine being told that your name is not valid. Think how that makes someone feel. Like, let's assume that I might be interested in history and where my name comes from, and like it means a great deal to me. Telling someone the name's not valid. What's next? Are we going to send somebody around to their house and just like, you know, like kick them in the face when they come out to work? It just seems unnecessary. This article on Medium by John, I think it's Moore Williams, he can never put his name anywhere because he's got a space between the Moore and the Williams. We work with someone who's got an apostrophe in his name, and he has to always write it without the apostrophe, and I can see how much it hurts him when he does it. Be consistent. If you ask for addresses and someone leaves an address line blank, and let's say it's the town or city address field, say enter town or city. If you ask them for another address later, don't say town or city must have an entry. Like, be consistent. There's no reason to not be. Sometimes errors sound better as instructions, like enter, boom, and sometimes they sound better as descriptions. But flavor clarity over consistency, but be consistent wherever possible. So this is the Claim Repay website on TransPennine Express, who have done a lot of good work recently, because they used to have a brilliant one when you typed into the boarding station box that has a placeholder and no label. If you typed in Newcastle and put a space at the end, it didn't know where you were talking about. Now they just delete the space for you. It's pretty cool. But the difference between that and these three is weird. I've left everything blank, you know, laughs. But why does this one specify the format? I haven't typed anything in yet. This one doesn't specify the hour-minute thing. This one doesn't tell me I've got to type letters in, so there is no consistency in that. Be specific. An error has occurred. Doesn't help anybody. Select an option, fill in the field. There is a great one that I found somewhere, but I couldn't find it, where in my head I can't help but add the word moron at the end. It's answer the question was the error message. It's like, are they going to somehow shine a light in my eye? It's great. Different errors need different messages. Empty is not the same as not valid. So if I leave an email field blank, it shouldn't say enter a valid email. I haven't entered anything yet. It should say enter an email, and you shouldn't use valid anyway. Use the word real. Keep it real. No, I'm not that cool. This is a great error. There has been an error, colon space, full stop. One of the fields you have entered contains invalid characters. Please click back and re-enter using only A to Z, 0 to 9, hyphens, underscores, full stops, and @ symbols. You get that if you put a space in your password on civil service jobs. But it doesn't even know which field it's in. That kind of freaks me out, a bit like the GitHub one did earlier. And that's what it actually looks like on the screen, by the way. That's the screen. No matter how good your error message is, avoid someone ever seeing it. Like, I'm pretty happy with some of my errors. I'm like, oh, that's clear, concise, it tells people what to do. I don't want people to see them. Because it means we've put a barrier in their place that they can't get around sometimes, oftentimes. Only display an error message if it's the best thing to do. So A good one is if someone has to be a certain age to qualify for something, and you type in a date of birth, that is a completely real date, but this person's too old. Don't give them an error message, because what do they do? You haven't marooned them in your service. Take them to a separate page what says, you can't add Jimmy to your claim because Jimmy's 53 years old, and Jimmy has to be 12. A better page with an elegant way to get back to the starting point or the home page is much better than an error message. Error messages are not the place to showcase your quirky tone of voice. Now, content people often disagree with me from like agencies and branding about this, but so this is kidley.co.uk. Craig presented this at the 2 or 3 times ago. So he left them blank. The first one says, please enter a recipient name, not bad. The second one, oops, you forgot to pop in your number. Don't be shy, creepy. The last one says, don't we need to know where we are going? Well, I would be in stitches right about now. Email, come on, you know this isn't a valid email. Do I? Do I understand username, @ domain name? Like, would my mum feel cool about that? My mum is totally legit, by the way. She's totally reasonable. She's not stupid. But even she might go, oh, I thought it said name. Do I have to blame someone? That seems a bit weird. When Twitter first launched, they used this, and it was named the Twitter fail whale. It was essentially because they couldn't cope with the amount of users they had. Now, I'm going to say it, and don't hurt us. Twitter is not important. So I can get away with this. It doesn't really bother me. But if this was, would you expect, is it the next one? Oh, it's 2 slides time. Some error pages like this are amazingly weird. So this is the Trainline app. If you don't have connection to the internet, it says, oops, connection to Trainline mothership lost. Please check your internet connection. This is the Twitter app when you are searching for something. It says, something went wrong. There aren't any tweets here, and there should be. Double check your internet connection, spelled with an X, weird. Then try again. But when you are browsing the Sunderland Digital Twitter page, as you should do, it just says no tweets. So the consistency is just dropped. This is like super tongue-in-cheek quirky, and this is like just factually correct. That seems more like it would take less of my time than that. That should just say, you're not connected to the internet, or possibly no tweets. But this is my fave. My friend was applying for a Virgin Startup Business Loan, and he clicked on a link to get the PDF form that you had to fill in to get the loan. And for some reason, the link didn't work. And this is the page not found. I built this up a lot now that I have too much. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure how we got here, ... Don't worry though, it's under control and we'll be back shortly. Picture of Richard Branson with his thumbs up. And you can't see it because it goes up, the picture's quite big, but he looks like he's on an airplane at a board table. It's really weird. So remember, error messages are not for quirky tones of voice. This is the place to help people. Cheers.
Going back to your Twitter example, just your last slides, that's becoming much common problem because I can tell why Twitter is like that. It's because they use a microservice architecture, so different development teams developing different parts of Twitter. Okay. So they don't have a standardized way of actually displaying error messages.
That's what I assumed.
Because I'm a back-end developer, and that's what most big systems are going towards now. Like you've got 20, like Amazon have 140 different microservices, different APIs that help build when you log on to, when you go to Amazon.com again. Okay. So obviously Twitter, Facebook all do the same. So obviously they've got no standardized way of actually what error messages should be. So you can tell that.
I've never noticed anything really bad in Amazon. I mean, I don't like how they do them, but they're not. It's not like in the Amazon locker part of the website and then in the address lock. It's like completely random. So there is I mean, the government, we have a set of standards. I've just told you what they are.
Yeah, you can tell it's just, I could say it's become more of a problem actually, just because of the way I'm a back-end developer and this way things are going now. Everything's now getting separated from, and so you need that standardization of, or even someone actually oversees that, and that's not part of the development team. Sure, you get what I mean?
It's the same as parts of Gmail do what's called confirm shaming, where they ask you if you want something, like, do you want to upgrade to the new smart Gmail? And you can say yes, or you can say, no, I don't want smarter emails. You'll get them all the time in pop-ups, which is, download our 10 healthy recipes, and the no will say, no, I don't want to be healthy, I like Burger King. And you just kind of, and you can see in some parts of Gmail it's like that, and some parts it's not, because I'm guessing it's because different teams work on different things.
So.
But confirm shaming is wrong. Why make someone feel bad just because they don't have the data to download the latest version of the app? And don't do that. I'll be honest with you, that freaks me out.
I'm guessing this also a problem is when back-end developers are doing front-end errors as well.
Yeah. I'm not a developer. I know enough to know that I know what I know. So I can live with the HTML and the CSS, and I taught myself a little bit of JavaScript. So I can kind of look at it and go, yeah, that's right. But I don't drift into a dev team and go, I'm ready to do some Scala today, boys, and some Java. Let me rock and roll. So is it really that hard to walk over to your content team and say, hey, we need an error message, what essentially says, you know, you can't enter a date in the future? I mean, that should be pretty straightforward. Anyway, any other questions? If it wasn't obvious, I could talk forever about this. This is like 3 different 1-hour presentations I've just smashed into 35 minutes. It took 35 minutes, I'm chuffed. Boom. I only wrote it this morning at 5:30. Don't do that, it's terrible, but I did it, and I've got to get over it. But yeah. And I'll explain about the Selectbox website that I don't want to say on camera. Thank you.